Welcome back, everyone. Oz here, and today I've got some r/stories about Kevin for you all. As per usual, I'll be reading you the posts, giving you my opinions, and I hope you do the same down in the comments below. And without further ado, let's jump right into it. Data laughing. My friend tries to divorce Kevin. When we were all younger and dumber, one of my closest friends married the craziest Kevin I've ever met. My friend had just come off of a very bad relationship that she'd been certain was going to end in marriage, when, in reality, the guy was cheating on her while using her to support his wannabe pro-golfer existence, then dumped her when someone with more money came along. So she was in a bad place. A few months later, Kevin appears. The first time I met Kevin was when the two of them showed up at my apartment to announce their engagement. Since I'd met the previous guy that she was seriously dating just a month before, I know they couldn't have been seeing each other very long. Turns out Kevin proposed 5 weeks after their first date. Maybe she was a bit of a Kevin too for saying yes at that point, but like I said, bad place. It's hard for me to accurately describe Kevin without dipping into being mean, because I never liked him from that first meeting. It was like he really wanted to be one of those hyper-masculine, manly men, but didn't quite know how. He liked to take any opportunity to bring up in conversation that he was a black belt. I remember the first time he said it because I asked, "Oh yeah? In what?" And he looked at me like I was an idiot. "In martial arts." "Oh, right, yeah. Of course." He also would talk at length about how much he worked out. Turns out he didn't actually work out at all. He liked to think of himself as a car guy because he had a sports car he couldn't afford and treated it like his baby. He didn't actually know anything about cars, but he had one. So car guy. But the thing that really got up my nose about the guy was that he prided himself on how very smart he was. He'd make the most outrageous claims with the most pig-headed certainty. He just knew these things were true, and if you disagreed, even if you showed actual physical proof that he was wrong, he'd just condescendingly tell you that you didn't understand these things like he did, and go on with his idiocy. Just as an example, he once declared that you can't break the law at night. What exactly does that mean? We still don't know. He won't elaborate. As a second example, he had trouble getting a fire going in their fireplace when he was home alone one day. His solution? Mix up some homemade napalm from a recipe he found on the internet. It was a huge disaster, set the kitchen on fire. Luckily, my friend arrived home in time to grab the fire extinguisher. Yet he insisted, doggedly, that he knew what he was doing. And really, this was the best way to get the fireplace going, and obviously she just didn't understand because she didn't know as much about this stuff as he did. Sorry, I know that's a lot of setting the stage. One last important thing to know about Kevin before we get around to the divorce I promised. Kevin was a religious nut. I don't mean he was crazy because he was religious. I've known many wonderful, intelligent religious people in my lifetime. Kevin was a crazy person who used religion as his MO. He would randomly proclaim, "The Bible says," to support whatever other crazy thing he'd said. Mostly people let him get away with it because, hell, the Bible is really long and says a lot of crazy shit. Who could say that somewhere in there it didn't actually say whatever insane thing he was claiming? And besides, who wants to confront crazy? Even when the claim was something insane like, "The Bible says that birds are of the devil." Yes, this is a thing he said one day when he was angry at birds for some reason. I was raised going to church twice a week, once upon a time, so I knew a bit about that particular book. And I had a pathological need when I was younger to call people on their bullshit. So we often butted heads. Unsurprisingly, when confronted, Kevin could never actually tell you where in the Bible it said you shouldn't take the first slice of pizza. Yeah, he said that too, but it didn't decrease his certainty that it was in there. So, as anyone but the two of them could have predicted, the marriage didn't last. He became increasingly erratic, forbidding her from speaking to friends, including me, because the Bible says so. hitting her because the Bible says she has to do whatever he says and he's allowed to beat her if she doesn't. Stuff like that. So she left. And here is where the wackiest Kevining begins. She gets a lawyer to initiate the divorce proceedings, and the first thing that comes up is the house. They bought the house from his parents. More precisely, she bought the house from his parents. He had terrible credit. As a result, his name wasn't on anything related to the house. He also had no job, meaning he never made a single payment on the house. As far as she saw it, the house was hers. His mother, who came into town to support her son through his misfortune, didn't see it that way. They declared that the house still belongs to the mother and threw all of my friend's stuff out on the lawn. Friend's lawyer gets a preliminary hearing date set up to determine the initial dispersion of important stuff like the house, at least until the divorce proceedings get all sorted. So, friend's lawyer says to Kevin, "Have your lawyer contact me to set up a meeting before the hearing." A meeting is set up, and who arrives at the lawyer's office but Kevin, dressed in jeans and a windbreaker, claiming to be Mr. Steele, the lawyer. I shit you not. He decided he'd be his own lawyer, and he'd call himself Mr. Steele. Not his name. I don't know how the initial meeting went, but when the time for the hearing came, Kevin was once again acting as his own attorney. This time, I can only assume he wasn't working under a pseudonym. Keep in mind, the rest of this is totally going off of her story to me immediately after the hearing. Kevin and his mother arrived 20 minutes late. Not at all dressed for court. Casual jeans and shirts. The first thing he says when he walks in is, "Can I approach the bench?" "Why?" the judge asks. "Because I have some receipts." So, friend gets called to the stand. Her lawyer asks a bunch of questions illustrating just how crazy Kevin is and how bad things had gotten about the house and stuff. Then Kevin, since he's the lawyer, gets to cross-examine. His first question, "Is it not true that you were beaten as a child?" Her lawyer, objection. The judge, sustained. The question had nothing to do with anything. Other questions included, "Is it not true that you were seeing a psychiatrist and on medication for depression?" No, that's not true. She'd never seen a mental health professional. Not sure if he thought he might trick her into lying on that one, or if he was so crazy he actually thought it was true. He asked a bunch of other ridiculous questions, which her lawyer let him ask because they were completely out of nowhere and just helped prove to the judge how nuts he was. Then he takes the stand. Her lawyer gets him to admit to pretty much everything they said he did, because it was all true, but he refuses to give specific answers to some of the more serious questions. Not no. Just doesn't want to give specifics. Then he gets to make a statement. His statement is how he doesn't want a divorce and also she was abusive to him, such as pinching him once when they were on the highway. Also, the Bible says that she's his wife, so she has to do whatever he wants, and that divorce is bad. How can the judge make them get a divorce when the Bible says not to? Apparently, he went on in this vein for a while. She just gave me a couple of the highlights. Needless to say, the initial hearing did not go his way. She ended up getting the house in the short term and a protective order against him after he admitted in court to his violence against her. The Bible says it's okay though, end quote. After this, he dragged his feet at every point of the process. For more than 6 months, he wouldn't show up to things or would refuse to sign things until the last possible moment. He moved to a different city and apparently joined the Army Reserve. When friend found out about this, her lawyer contacted someone there to point out that he wasn't allowed to be around weapons or something like that because of the protective order. Legal stuff that's over my head. The lawyer even contacted him and offered to drop the protective order so he could stay in if he just agreed to finishing the divorce proceedings in a timely manner. Kevin refused. In the end, he got pretty much nothing and quietly disappeared. Also, sorry if I sound off today. I woke up with a splitting migraine again, and it is definitely affecting my ability to read and speak. Part of me really hopes I could bear witness to how that conversation went when Kevin first went to the lawyer's office as Mr. Steele. I get the feeling that the lawyers probably promptly alerted him that posing as a lawyer could end him up in a lot of trouble, thus causing him to drop his really shitty and goofy persona. Let this be a valuable lesson of don't represent yourself in court. It's a really good way to end up getting screwed over by your own actions. Kevin being the shiny example of why not to do this. Also, I want to circle back to the fact that Kevin made napalm in the kitchen as an attempt to heat the house. Don't make napalm to light the fireplace. That's a really bad idea, in case I'm the first person to tell you that. Also, as I found out recently while trying to figure out how to get rid of styrofoam in a non-messy way because all little goddamn beads that break off are just so goddamn annoying, one of the first things that Google does with its little AI bullshit tool is almost accidentally teaching you how to make a napalm-adjacent substance because it literally tells you to dissolve the styrofoam in gasoline, which you should not do because while it is not napalm, it still produces an extremely sticky and flammable substance. Don't do that. It's very dangerous. The only reason why I bring it up is because I wonder if that's what Kevin did to try and light the fireplace, is styrofoam and gasoline, which on the internet is commonly misattributed to being a napalm recipe. And why Google's AI is recommending that as a solution to get rid of styrofoam is beyond me. To be fair, it also recommends acetone, but don't do that either because it produces an extremely toxic fume. Long story short, I really hate styrofoam and I have no easy way to get rid of it. And it's not even the tolerable styrofoam either, where at least it stays together. It's the kind that breaks up into 500 million different little beads of styrofoam that clings to everything and is just a nightmare to clean up, and you'll find those little bastards everywhere. God damn, my house is 90% styrofoam right now and I can't figure out how to get rid of it. Actually, now that I complain about it and think about it, I do have a little spray bottle water atomizer. I might be able just to hose down some of the styrofoam pellets and be able to better manage that. Huh. Hey, guess what? It's here. That's right, the Gamer Subs Cup is actually here. It's me, Eyes, but as an owl girl. I also really like owls, so I thought this would be a cool combination. If we sell enough of these, it brings me to the next step of getting my own flavor, which would be super cool. There's also a shirt that's being dropped with this, and their shirts are actually super goddamn cozy and comfy. I'm actually wearing one right now while recording. Linky in the description, and probably a pinned comment. Twin Mom 823. My son might be a Kevin. I've long thought my youngest might be a Kevin. We've had to explain to him that simply washing your hair and allowing the shampoo to run down your body isn't the proper way to wash up. We've had multiple conversations about remembering to lift the lid on the toilet seat before doing your business. We've had to remind him to look both ways in the parking lots because he thought it only applied to crossing streets. Yesterday, though, I got confirmation that he is in fact a Kevin. After work yesterday, my son met me at the door. He told me he had really exciting news to share. He has a girlfriend. He's only in 6th grade, and this is his first girlfriend. I asked some questions about her, and asked what her name was. He doesn't know her name. He's been eating lunch with this girl for the last month, has learned enough about her to know he wanted her to be his girlfriend, but never bothered to ask her name. We came up with a plan for him to ask for her phone number today, and then ask her how she spells her name so he can put it in his phone after school. I just pray her name isn't something simple like Kim or Jill. Update, we have a name. He introduced the girlfriend to his sister today at school and she asked. She actually did him a solid. She said, "Wait, what's your name?" "Oh, you're the girl he's had a crush on since the first day." There is clarification in the comments. Kyle Dry comments, "Sorry, does he not lift the lid or the seat? Because one of these is way worse than the other. And you said lid." OP responds, "I did indeed say lid." Followed up by Marky444 commenting, Was he peeing on the toilet lid?" OP further clarifies, yes, he's no longer allowed to take the phone to the bathroom with him. OP also does clarify that so far, after evaluation, the son, Kevin, only seems to have ADHD, no other developmental disorders. Just a massive focus on the attention deficit aspect. So yes, indeed a Kevin. And this is coming from someone who has ADHD, by the way. Schattentochter. Kevina thinks she's bilingual. Austrian here. My sister used to take in couch surfers from all across the world. Most were lovely fellows with interesting stories to tell. But one time, we hit the jackpot. We got a set of 4 American stereotypes, the ones that I used to think were only in real movies, and one of them was an airheaded cheerleader who was one hell of a pain. Since they're not relevant to the story, I won't go into detail about how rude and obnoxious Kevina behaved during the days leading up to the event. But let me tell ya, at this point, even her friends were done with her. It's New Year's Eve. The couch surfers decide to stay with us instead of going out into the city, and my sis and I go about our New Year's celebration the same way we always do. Having fondue, dancing to the Blue Danube, I think, and watching Dinner for One. Midnight comes and goes, and within less than 5 minutes, Kevina takes her laptop to the other room to video call her parents, leaving the door open. And off she goes, complaining loudly about how my sister and I are embarrassing as fuck, literally how she pronounced it. How that Austrian food we had sucked. As much as I would like to claim fondue for our cuisine, the French would likely be opposed. How the mountains looked fake and whatnot. My sister and I were in the living room with the others, perfectly able to hear every word, while her friends turned red as tomatoes and started giving us apologetic looks. Cue Kevina's return, marching into the living room with a carefree attitude of the ignorant dumbass. Kevina's friend. Kevina? We heard you. All of us. Kevina responds, So what? I was talking American! My sister and I just looked at each other and started laughing so hard. It took us a few minutes to calm down. She had been talking to us every single day in English, but somehow that was different in Kevina's world. Her friends apologized profusely. Kevina did not because she just couldn't believe, even when we told her, that yes, we do understand American. Edit, I forgot to mention the part where she complained about stupid Austrian TV regarding Dinner for One. For those who don't know it, it's an English sketch and it was shot in the UK, well, Germany. Thanks to the commenters who pointed this out to me. Additional edit. Since a few of you were talking about it in the comments, the fondue I'm referring to is fondue, oh god, I'm not pronouncing that even in the slightest. Bourguignon? I have no idea. A French dish, but you are correct by pointing out that not all kinds of fondue come from France. If anyone's curious, here it goes, and then they link a fondue history website. It's thanks to people like this, as well as a variety of other reasons, that Americans are oftentimes looked at overseas as being, well, ridiculous and stupid or uneducated. And granted, it's not entirely unjustified, but goddamn does it paint with a broad stroke. Commercial.708. Kevin doesn't believe time zones are real and thinks airlines are just gaslighting us. Kevin and I were planning a trip together, which in hindsight was my first mistake, but at the time, I didn't know what I was signing up for. Everything was fine until we started looking at flights. Kevin stared at the screen for a long time, very focused. And then he said something like, "That doesn't make sense." I assumed he meant prices or layovers. He meant the concept of time. He pointed at the arrival time and said, completely calmly, "So we leave at 9 a.m. and land at 11 a.m., but the flight is 5 hours. Where did the other 3 hours go?" I explained time zones. Not rushed or sarcastic, I've learned with Kevin that tone matters. He nodded, but in a way that felt like he was humoring me. Then he said, "No, I get what they say time zones are. I just don't think they're real." I asked him what he meant by that. He said time zones are more of a suggestion airlines use to make schedules look nicer, like a formatting thing. According to Kevin, the plane obviously takes 5 hours, so landing 2 hours later is fake math. He genuinely believed airlines just shift clocks around to avoid scaring people with long travel days. I tried another angle. I asked him why people in different countries are asleep at different times. He said, because they choose to be. At some point, I realized he thought the entire world basically agreed to pretend time works differently in different places, and airlines were the biggest benefactors of the lie. He even said, "Notice how they never explain it properly? That's how you know." The wild part is that Kevin wasn't angry. He wasn't confused, he was confident. He said it like someone explaining a well-known scam, which honestly felt on brand. Later, while we were talking about budgeting for the trip, he complained that his money moves at weird times too, and that he never trusts when things actually hit his account. I mentioned I use a not a gambling app, but it does feel like an unsolicited ad. Definitely raises an eyebrow. I mentioned I use an app that watches balances and charges in the background and helps make sense of timing instead of me guessing. He paused and said, "Okay, but that's different. Money is fake anyway." We still went on the trip. Kevin arrived on time despite not believing in local time and somehow managed to make it through airport security without questioning the clocks there. To this day, I'm not sure if he secretly understands time zones and just enjoys the chaos, or if he truly believes the world collectively agreed to lie about time. Either way, I don't plan trips with Kevin anymore. Not because of the time zone thing specifically, but because I don't have the emotional energy to argue with someone who thinks time is a suggestion. I'm still a bit caught up on the random insertion of an AI app being put in there. It definitely makes my eyebrow raise a bit, and wondering if this might just be an undisclosed ad similar to what we saw with the gambling ones. So, to my understanding, time zones actually began to originate once we started getting telegraphs and the railway system started being built, because before then, if you were living in a town and going off of the local time and usually going off of the position of the sun, your noon would be very different than someone's noon who's even just 100 to 200 miles away. So there's definitely complications with using solar-based timekeeping methods because my noon would be probably 10 to 20 minutes earlier than someone's noon who's a couple hundred miles away. And if you're trying to coordinate around a specific time, that's going to make things complicated. So, as the railway and telegraph systems expanded, this led to the creation of the time zones to kind of give a unified time structure to everyone within specific areas. This way, rather than going off of solar time, if I said 12 o'clock, a town 200 to 300 miles away would have the same 12 o'clock instead of it being a couple minutes off. Which then the time zones were laid out with hour-long increments every 15 degrees along the longitudinal lines. This way, everyone had a semblance of normalcy with their local times while still having a somewhat coordinated time zone structure. That's a very, brief explanation of how it happened. I'm sure there's someone in the comment section who could give a far more detailed and probably correct version of how time zones came to be, but it's not because of airlines. Although I would be so curious to pick this Kevin's brain and just get a taste of their worldview, because stuff like this, I have a morbid curiosity of how people come to these kinds of conclusions with their day-to-day life. In this age of information, even though it's becoming as fucky as it is, how do you come to that conclusion when Google is right there? I just have so many questions and curiosities as to how this is your worldview. Weary Hair 316. Kevin thought pending charges didn't count yet, so he spent the money twice. This came up because Kevin kept complaining that his bank app was lying to him. According to him, his balance looked fine, but somehow he kept running out of money faster than expected. He was convinced the app was just slow or glitchy, that things would sort themselves out once everything settled. One day he showed me his phone to prove it. His balance looked decent, not rich, but enough that he shouldn't have been stressed. Then I noticed a bunch of charges marked as pending. Food, gas, a couple online purchases, nothing crazy. I asked him why he was ignoring all the pending stuff. He said very confidently, That doesn't count yet. It's not real money until it posts. I thought he was joking, but he was not. Kevin explained that pending charges were basically a preview and that he could still spend what was showing as available. His logic was that if the bank was still showing the money, then it was fair game. If it overdrafted later, that was future Kevin's problem. So what would happen is he'd buy groceries, see the charge pending, then go out and buy something else because his balance still looked okay. Then the next day, everything would post at once and he'd act genuinely shocked that his account went negative. This apparently happened more than once. After watching him do this mental gymnastics, I told him he needed something that shows what's actually coming out instead of letting him argue with his bank app. Oh god fucking damn it. I recommended the app from earlier that we encountered, which watches balances pending, fucking god. Watches balances, pending charges, and reoccurring stuff so you can see what's effectively already spent, even if it hasn't posted yet. A few days later, he texted me and said, "Okay, this is annoying, but I get it now." He had finally realized that pending doesn't mean optional, it just means delayed. He stopped treating his balance like a suggestion and stopped double spending money that was already gone. Kevin now says things like, "I don't trust pending charges," as if they personally betrayed him. He still complains about banks, but at least now, he waits for things to clear before pretending he has more money than he does. Honestly, I've never encountered a single banking app out of like the 6 or 7 banks that I've gone through that don't show pending charges as already pulled. Maybe there's one bank out there that doesn't, but this doesn't seem like a common issue. The reason why I point that out is because it's in complete antithesis to the app they're trying to fucking advertise for. The fact that there's been 2 of them, which shadow advertise these goddamn apps, tells me that it's spreading. It used to be Am I Overreacting with Gambling ads, and now it's Stories About Kevin and Kevin's being dumb, but oh, don't worry, this money app that uses chat fucking GPT. That's what you gotta use to fix your money problems, good fucking god. The fact that it's 100% free makes me think this is some sort of financial data scraping app, which, yeah. So definitely, as a little bit of a PSA, if you encounter an app being randomly name-dropped and you don't recognize it, just assume there's a decent chance that it might actually be an ad. Because if it's not an app that's relatively common or at least is well-known, like DoorDash or Amazon or, I don't know, UPS, where at least it can make feasible sense for the name to be dropped in the middle of a conversation or post. If not, I would definitely be suspicious or cautious and assume that what you might be looking at is an ad, even if it's undisclosed. CWU007. Kevina says all 3 computers are wrong, and she's right. I don't know if this woman was a Kevina or a delusional Karen, but I kept saying to myself, how could someone be this stupid? And boy, is this woman an idiot. Which is why I've chosen this subreddit. I'm a shift supervisor for a retail drugstore chain. Some background info. In the USA, controlled substances such as Norco, Adderall, Percocet, etc. are highly regulated. Your prescription may not be refilled early. If you have a 30-day supply of a controlled substance, you must get it on day 30 or later. Other medications, such as diabetes, high blood pressure, cholesterol, etc., may be refilled early, just insurance might not pay for it early. Whenever a controlled substance is sold, the DEA is also notified. This is to keep track of people trying to get multiple prescriptions of the same medication from multiple doctors. Whenever a controlled substance is sold in my pharmacy, we also require government ID and enter relationship to patient. Most of the time, it's self. It's a slow Saturday afternoon and I get a call to pharmacy to handle Kevina. Kevina. I always pick up my prescriptions the day they're filled. I understand due to them being controlled, I can't have them sooner. They were filled on March 3rd, today is April 5th, so I should be able to refill them. However, your pharmacy says I can't refill them until tomorrow. There's something wrong with your system. Mia, do you have the receipt? Kevina. Yes. Kevina hands me 4 prescription labels. 2 were of controlled substances. Kevina. These say March 3rd, and I always pick up on the day they're filled. The pharmacist starts signaling me that Kevina is wrong and to come over. Mia. Your prescriptions were filled on March 3rd. Once they're filled, you have a week to pick them up. These labels mean nothing. Kevina: I said I always pick up my medication the day it was filled. Me: I'm going to check our records. I'll be right back. I go back and the pharmacist shows me that the pharmacy records show that her prescriptions were picked up on March 7th, all with her driver's license number. I show the paper to Kevina. Kevina swears the system must be wrong. I tell Kevina I can go to the office and look up her receipt from that day. Kevina agrees. Surprise, surprise, Kevina picked up 4 prescriptions on March 7th, all with her name on it. Kevina swears again the system is wrong. I tell her the cash register receipt system is a separate system from the pharmacy. The pharmacist also hands me the DEA record to show Kevina picked up her prescriptions on March 7th. I tell Kevina if she brings her receipt with all 4 prescriptions from March 3rd, we'll contact IT and the DEA to change the dates. I go back to have a quick talk with the pharmacy staff. They tell me Kevina has a history of trying to get her prescriptions early and throws a fit when we reject or insurance refuses. However, tomorrow is day 30, so she'll probably just pick up her prescriptions without much fuss. I thought that was the end of it, but I was wrong. 2 days later, I'm passing through the crowd in pharmacy when Kevina sees me. Kevina: are your systems manually entered? Me: what? No, they're automatic. Something gets rung up and it's automatically entered in the system. I have a feeling this won't be my last encounter with Kevina. At least next time, I'm prepared. See, when it said 3 computers, I was expecting to be 3 different computers and going from each one and each one having the same answer and, well, I guess I'll try the next one to see if it's gonna be anything different. I wasn't expecting it to be between a cross comparison of the store's point of sale system, its pharmacy, as well as the fucking DEA database. Also gotta love her trying to come back in. Well, is it manually entered? Maybe seeing if they can get a little bit of a gotcha in there. But nope, either you have a poor memory or you're trying to pull something. Either way, it's definitely not the computers. Also, it's not a nationwide thing for the exactly 30 days. I know in some states, you can pretty much get it filled like 3 days early, but it's definitely a state per state kind of thing. Don't forget, this is brought to you by GamerSupps. Use code ODDS at checkout. It's basically a caffeine powder that you put in your water, and I actually really like it. I use this on a daily basis. Don't forget that every purchase you make using code ODDS directly supports the channel. And if you want a personal recommendation from me, I would either recommend the Soda Pressing Bear or Dragon Fruit Punch. Those 2 are currently my favorite flavors. And as a note, once we sell a certain amount of stuff, I get my own flavor and my own cup. And you all know I'm gonna choose some degenerate shit that's gonna make their PR team squirm. My goal is to make them regret partnering with me. So please, use code ODDS at checkout to make my dream come true of making a PR team squirm.